Feudum is set in a fantasy medieval world ruled by kings and queens. You'll find such modern advancements as flying ships and submarines, as well as simple farms, landscapes, orchards, mines, and towns. All is not as it seems though, because below the water surface lies a monstrous sea serpent, and in the mountains hides the dangerous behemoth. The people fear the destruction caused by these monsters, but some would try to tame them for their own purposes. Many travelers who were banished from their homes, left with barely a shilling to their name, have come to this strange land to regain their honor. Seeking fame and glory, some dedicate their lives to farming the earth, fighting as knights under Queen Anne, or attempting to rule their own feudums. Feudum is the Latin word for fiefdom, a land granted by a feudal lord. Many new migrants caused some unrest for available land. Windmills and catapults also arrived with them. In these times, the fertile land is scarce, food is dwindling, and fantastical creatures loom nearby. Wine is a popular vice, preserved in barrels with the sulfur from nearby sulfur mines. Being too intoxicated, though, may lead to being manipulated by their neighbors, or worse, their land being conquered. At least they won't be hungry for a while. The dominion ruled by King Daniel is divided into 6 regions: the sea, island, forest, desert, badlands, and mountains. The divisions are not only by region. There are 6 membership guilds that reward veneration to those who have the highest status within them. The travelers have found that seeking a high status in one or more of these guilds is the best way to quickly move up in the world. The farmers that have come to this land must join the Farmers Guild to effectively sell their food. Merchants rely heavily on the farms to produce what they need. Traders and salespeople must join the Merchants Guild to control the market and earn the most shillings, becoming some of the richest lords of the land. The inventors of the Alchemist Guild frequently purchase needed goods from merchants to create gunpowder barrels known as crud, as well as the modern inventions the people use. Here is where the flying machines, submersibles, and seaworthy ships are constructed. Travelers with the skills for fighting may end up joining the Knight Guild, seeking honor and seals of approval from the king. To stock up supplies, many seek out the crud barrels to help them conquer the lands around them. Perhaps with enough crud, they could also persuade the monsters in the land to assist them. With enough power, any beast can become subservient. Those who seek the king must first deal with Queen Anne. Joining the Nobles Guild is the fastest way to become diplomatic in relationship with the queen. She tasks them with delivering the king's seals to the worthy knights. While the king is away, she uses his crown seal ring to stamp on burning red wax her own seals. At her whim, mere commoners could become vassals. The most noble of these in the guild will also have to work with the church. The more religious of travelers will want to join the Monk Guild, because of course they are truly the ones in control. Their rosary beads are symbols of wealth, power, and prosperity for the land. It is they who bless the farmer's harvest, and around it goes. The guilds must work together if they are all to prosper. However, kind diplomacy is not the only path to veneration here. As the people build up their own outposts, farms, and towns, more would seek to take it from them. Undefended locations may be easily overtaken and conquered, so the people must always be careful to maintain a presence in their most important areas. It is not unusual to find other means of fighting, by way of surrounding their towns and starving them out. Back at the castle, the red-haired Queen Anne sought gold, her obsession. She was not swayed with royal status, fine linens, or queenly couture. Adorned with a golden tiara, gold jewelry, and even gilded toe rings, her pursuit of gold is her primary desire. However, she wasn't always like this. When King Daniel courted her, she had a kind and generous heart. Over time, her beauty faded, and she turned to other men and treasure. Queen Anne was often seen peering out the window in the royal tower, running her fingers through her hair and whispering to her pet snake, Sammy.
"Nothing suits my suitors sweeter than gold,"
she uttered, and her pet agreed.
Sss.
King Daniel was not privy to her disloyalty, and was a generous, although foolish man. His subjects believed heaven bestowed benevolence on him. Queen Anne always secretly bemoaned his charity work, abhorring the idea of depleting the royal treasury. However, in public she was always supportive of it and feigned sympathy. The king had full trust in his queen to lead the kingdom while he was away. not realizing she had no love left for him or his ways. King Daniel took Sir Marcus with him on a noble expedition. Sir Marcus was a brave but battle-worn knight and widely admired across the kingdom. He dreams of his affection for the queen, but never will betray his loyalty to the throne. As part of his duties for King Daniel, he recruited troops and enforced taxes from the local towns. Through the tax money, more outposts were funded at the edges of the kingdom. The king and Sir Marcus wrote several royal charters that led to the kingdom expanding and laws that rewarded his subjects' ingenuity. During one year, a great famine struck his kingdom. King Daniel sought help from the monks, asking them to pray for a bountiful harvest. In return, he gave them much land and wealth so alms could be given to the poor. Brother Justinius of the church was a loyal subject and his holy confidant. As the king tossed him a pouch of shillings, Justinius replied, "The people cherish thy charity, good king. Make choirs cheer and Chaucer chronicle your good name." While the harvest was low, many people turned to the sea for food. The sea was home to many seals, but also to the dreaded siren monster. Her song has lured many to their death. On one freezing night, the queen donned a dark emerald cloak and secretly met with Lord Arthur, the Earl of Alchemy. While he was most known for his cogs, pulleys, and contraptions, the queen heard rumors he was actually a sorcerer with the power to create explosions and fuse common elements into gold. It was on this night that the Earl and his cat Norin were startled by a knock at the door.
"It is your good queen, my good Earl,"
she revealed.
"I have come to share concoctions of my own."
The queen spoke to him in hushed tones, urging him to reveal the secrets of his alchemy. But when the Earl refused her request of the unstable formula, she stealthily snatched his journal and ran. As she strode away, the Earl uttered, "May malady malign you, my mercurial menace." The cat simply gave out a meow. With the queen's growing frustration with the dwindling treasury, she stole the alms set aside for the poor, until she had returned the royal treasury to its former amount. Her selfish treachery led to the starvation of a huge number of commoners, as well as driving up the price of goods. Not everything was bad, though, for the dashing Lord Brett had become quite wealthy since the prices went up. He was the wealthiest merchant in the land. "Good squires, like squirrels, never squander," the merchant quipped, as he shooed a rat from his apple barrel. Squeak! As the famine and starvation got worse, the king tried to assess how bad the harvest was. He invited a young farm maiden and friend to the poor, Miss Allison, into his court. She was plain but beautiful. As she addressed the king, she held a lamb in her arms and boldly spoke on behalf of her starving countrymen.
"Banish us before hunger becomes the bane of our existence."
The lamb softly bleated. The king tried even more to give generous charity to help the poor and starving, but Queen Anne as equally scheming to take it back. With the stolen alchemy formula from Lord Arthur, she poured it on her pet snake Samuel to test it. She smiled as he turned into gold in front of her eyes.
"My dear husband shall be next,"
she whispered, clutching the snake's gilded neck in her fist. That same night, she convinced King Daniel to take a private royal cruise with her. Of course, she laced his wine with the mixture in his royal chalice. With a toast, they drank.
"To our love,"
she mumbled, as she watched his visage stiffen into gold. She kept all of her golden victims in an old barn loft. By the next morning, the farm maiden Miss Allison noticed a rustling in the hay while tending her chickens. As she peered into the hay, to her surprise was a solidified gold king and snake. The snake burst out of the gold, slithered to the nearest pasture, and engulfed an entire cow. He then wrapped himself around a windmill and grew quite large. It then slithered into the sea, but not before hissing an oddly articulate sound, "Limas." Horrified, Miss Allison ran to the nearest outpost and found Sir Marcus, who was training with catapults. She and the knight returned to the barn and saw the golden remains in the hay. Among the golden pieces was a metal shard that bore the resemblance of King Daniel's face. Suddenly the ground began to shake. High in the sky was a giant behemoth, frantically scooping up herds of sheep and eating them whole. The knight, who was close friends with the king, immediately recognized the behemoth's gait as the king's. He exclaimed, "Surely King Daniel has been bedeviled." Miss Allison added solemnly,
"Until we can undo this backward sorcery, the creatures shall henceforth be called Linod."
Queen Anne had to come up with a plan to absolve herself of the king's disappearance. So she chartered a boat towards the northern waters where sirens were known to be. The siren songs have lulled many lustful men and their vessels headfirst into the rocky crags. The most famous of these water witches was known as Elizabeth Jane of the Shore. The queen sailed right past her, being immune to her attractions. The queen sailed into 2 whirlpools to deliberately sink the royal ship. To the public, she appeared as the jilted widow. Many people often heard her say things like,
I'm afraid the king's lust and lechery led to his lurid demise.
All the faithful believed her tale, except for the king's holy confidant. Brother Justinius was highly suspect of the tale the queen told. He came across the royal-crested wrecked ship and began to investigate. Squeezing into the cabin, he found a journal filled with notes written in Queen Anne's handwriting. Within the pages, she had chronicled her failed attempt at keeping her husband in a golden tomb using Lord Arthur's alchemy. The monk quickly made way to see the Earl, as well as the faithful Sir Marcus. During their discussion, they learned the queen had demanded the behemoth's head. We must expose her treachery and save the king by nightfall, said the monk. The Earl of Alchemy then led them to his latest invention, a sky vessel propelled by wind and hoisted by hot air. The 3 boarded the flying ship. The monk held the Earl's cat Norin and nervously uttered, Godspeed to us all. The flying machine soared over the behemoth Lenad and descended towards the queen's castle. Brace yourselves, cried the Earl, as he carefully steered onto the peak of a small hummock. The airship skidded lightly across the hill's crest until it barreled headfirst into a tree. Looking ready for battle, Sir Marcus exited the craft first, followed by the monk and the Earl. On 2 flanking hills lay camped the queen's army. The cavalry's steeds grazed nearby. One knight called out to his straying horse, Atticus, grabbing the reins from the ground. This is the royal mount. Her attack must be imminent. The horse agreed. Queen Anne wore chainmail, a breastplate, and royal helmet forged from pure gold. She came out of the royal tent and scanned the horizon for the behemoth. Leonid was on the horizon, but the queen also happened to see her royal horse being taken by 3 men. She cried,
Treason!
And summoned her army to attack, saying,
Kill the beast and his foul companions!
Archers filled the air with their fiery arrows. The queen grabbed a bow from a nearby archer and ran towards the monster that was once her husband. The farm maiden, Miss Allison, was in the field with her lamb, Greta, at this time. She dropped her haversack upon seeing her pet in peril.
My pearls!
She cried as she picked up her lamb and held it tightly. The queen was racing toward their path and began aiming her weapon for the monster's heel. Just before letting the arrow go, Miss Allison threw herself in its path to save the king. The arrow did not make it to the behemoth. As the queen began to curse her luck, the behemoth picked her up and placed her gently onto the castle parapet. Struck by his mercy, she tearfully murmured,
My Daniel.
A few minutes later, Miss Allison revealed to Sir Marcus her pet lamb was the queen's arrow's final resting place. Sir Marcus held the dying Greta in his arms. Welcome to the world of Feudum.